my personal experience as representing the state as an employer when its employees got hurt and representing the second injury fund, I've found, and I think a lot of other people who have done that would agree, that most Missourians are hardworking. They would rather work than collect a check. They want to get back on the job. They want to get cured of their injury and just get back to work. They don't want to sit on the couch and collect 2/3 of what they were earning before they had the injury. So that is sort of the backdrop of this. And let me give you some numbers because these are quite telling. We pulled the last 5 years of data regarding our referrals, the Division of Workers' Compensation referrals to the Attorney General's office for either workers' compensation fraud or workers' compensation noncompliance. And let me just say, workers' compensation noncompliance is the failure of an employer to maintain either workers' compensation coverage or to have the authority for the state to be self-insured for its workers' compensation liability. In Missouri, if you have 5 or more employees, or if you have 1 or more employee and you're engaged in construction, you must have workers' compensation coverage. So the interesting thing, I guess, to report that may surprise the members, in the last 5 years, and I would guess that the previous 5 years and the years prior to that also reflect this, but in the last 5 years, an average of 92% of the cases that were referred by the Division of Workers' Compensation to the Attorney General's office for prosecution were employers who were not in compliance with the workers' compensation law. Flip side of that, of course, is 8% of those cases historically over the last 5 years were for workers' compensation fraud. Of the fraud subset, much better than half of the fraud cases were fraud by employers. Fraud by employers typically falls into 1 of 2 categories, and actually now 3 that we've sort of been working on recently. It can either be premium fraud, misreporting to your comp carrier the nature of work that your employees do, the number of employees that you have, things of that nature. We see some instances of that. Another area in which there's been some quote-unquote fraud is in failure to report injuries at all. You're required within 30 days to report injuries to the Division of Workers' Compensation, and there have been instances of failure to do that, and that's considered fraud under the law. The third category is somewhat related, but one that we've found some trouble with recently, and that is late reporting of injuries and deaths to the Division. It's very important to us because the whole process of a workers' compensation benefits begins with a report to the Division and then notice going out to the injured employee and to the employer and ensure that, hey, this is what has to happen now. And if we don't get timely notice of that at the Division, we can't provide information to injured employees, which we're required to do by law. The second injury fund surcharge, which is now capped at 3% following the 2005 law changes, that's 3% of your premium. And I can tell you that when we have cases that we refer over to the Attorney General's office, usually the amount of the premium in question is around $3,500. So 3% of that is $105. And that clearly, I think the committee members, if they don't already know this, will learn it today from some of the other witnesses, that clearly is not going to be an amount of money or a pursuit that would provide any sort of meaningful assistance to the second injury fund.
Currently, there are over 28,000 pending cases against the fund that are in the queue. Approximately 10,000 new cases are filed each year. And in that first bullet point, we highlight that there are already 476 hearings scheduled for 2010, which is a marked increase over previous years. 465 of those are scheduled just for the first 3 months of 2010, which comes out to, I think, 155 per month. One of the reasons for that market increase in hearings is that last fall, the Attorney General's office ceased settling second injury fund claims. And the reason for that is because in consultation with the Department of Labor, in consultation with the State Treasurer's Office, we were alerted that the solvency of the fund was in peril, and that the balance in the fund simply did not have enough. There was not enough money in the fund to support its ongoing obligations or the payroll for our office, and so we ceased settlements at that time, with the recognition that that is a short-term solution. One, I think we've seen a reduction in the amount of money coming in, and I think Peter addressed that during his comments. The the premium reduction has caused, and I've got this on the sheet. In 2009, the fund collected approximately $53 million, compared with $70 million just a few years ago. So we've seen a dramatic decline in revenues. I think we've also seen an increase in claimants, and I think that's just a fundamental shift that we've seen that evolve. But in terms of what our office has tried to do to reduce the amount being paid out, I mean, last summer the Attorney General's office agreed to reduce the settlement cap to $40,000 from what had previously been $60,000, recognizing that we had a solvency issue and a viability issue. There's no backstop for the second injury fund, and the statutes are unclear about what happens if the fund is unable to satisfy its obligations. We're evaluating that question though, but I can tell you the answer is not clear, and it's certainly not as apparent as we would like.
It is probably certain that if we do nothing, the state will be sued over some case, because if a worker is harmed, he has a right to coverage, he wins his lawsuit, the state of Missouri is going to ultimately be liable. Now the question is the liability going to accrue against his worker comp coverer, or is it going to accrue against the general revenue? And I think there's people who believe both things, but I don't think anybody will say for certain what way they think that'll come out. But clearly the guy who gets hurt is going to, and we all want him to recover, him or her. But the fact of the matter is, if we do nothing, that is going to happen. The lawsuit is going to happen. Pretty soon, an injured worker is going to win, and there's going to be a liability for his previously existing condition, either against his comp cover or against the state general revenue.
I'll keep my comments brief because I think most of anything I'd have to say is covered already. We were as well participants in this past interim sessions discussions with many of the folks that are in this room. I know I've had some similar conversations with Representative Kelly, as well as you, Mr. Chair, and some others that are here. And so we are very willing to sit down and continue to talk about ways that we can try to address the situation. I will be like the previous person that was up here. We're going to hold firm on the surcharge level, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about other ideas and ways to address the situation. Some of which we were for last year, some of which have yet to be discussed formally in terms of legislation. But we're very happy to do it. Appreciate it.